can you share a bit about your journey into curating? What first drew you to Southeast Asian contemporary art?
Thank you, Julia. So I've been surrounded by art for a long time, for as long as I can remember. My great-grandfather was actually an impressionist painter in Italy. So I was surrounded by art when I was growing up. And I was very fortunate in that sense because art was always like a quiet companion for me. And then I've learned art in university, but I really developed a true engagement with contemporary art when I moved to Thailand 25 years ago. And that was my first introduction to Southeast Asia and Thai contemporary art. It was really a pivotal shift because I first had to start learning Thai language. And then gradually I immersed myself in learning about the culture, about the philosophy, about the religion. So it was a whole system that I needed to absorb and gradually enter contemporary art. Um, this journey led me also to pursue two master degrees. One was in Singapore, another one was in London, always focusing on Southeast Asian art and theories. Uh, for the last 25 years, basically, I've dedicated myself to researching Southeast Asian contemporary art, especially through field work and field research, which I find really a stepping stone, fundamental moment in developing a project, a curatorial project. I also teach occasional guest lecturers sometimes, writing and researching overall. And this has been my methodology to enter contemporary art in Southeast Asia.
You've curated exhibitions across Asia and internationally, from Bangkok to Manila, New York to Lisbon. How do you adapt your curatorial voice to different cultural contexts?
Yeah, this is a very good question, actually, because you do need to adapt as a curator. You have different cultures you are communicating to, um, and therefore they have different um, uh, communicating channels, and you have to cross those bridges in different ways, especially addressing issues that are very local within Southeast Asia, and people and an audience living in New York or in Europe might not be familiar. So it's a lot of adaptation on the ground, thinking beforehand what type of curatorial approach will be suitable, if it's more didactical or if it's more open to interpretation to the audience that it's going to visit or engage with the exhibition. I have an example. For instance, I've done, like since you mentioned New York, I've done a few projects in New York in galleries, so commercial galleries, organization, non-for-profit organization, and one project was at the Queen's Museum. So very different spectrum of audiences. And I started with the galleries in Manhattan, um, Madison area, but also Lower East Side. And I've understood by doing those projects that actually my audience would relate to Thailand more as a traveling destination, as a tourist destination. Some audience would engage more in terms of historical connections with this country or countries. I've done also projects with Southeast Asian artists, not only from Thailand. So I had to make an appeal more through those channels and that communication to go deeper into the works, which by definition, my projects are all related to sociopolitical issues. So I needed some introduction to get the audience to relate to those topics. But when I did the exhibition at the Queen's Museum, it was 2017. I was titled Architectural Landscape, Southeast Asia in the forefront, and there were several Southeast Asian artists. I had a completely different experience because Queens is a melting pot of different um, communities, including Southeast Asian communities, or perhaps minorities, we can call them. So I realized that we were speaking the same language in terms of giving attention to minor voices or minor stories that needed to be brought to the attention of the public. We had a much more intimate relation with the audience, so they would immediately understand what I was trying to convey through the works, and and it was different from my previous experiences with the gallery, where I needed an introduction. So then I quickly needed to adapt a little bit to with the way I was presenting the project to the audience, and that was a really an incredible experience for me to this day. Was a turning point because it made me realize that even within the same country, you need to use different communicating tools and curatorial approaches.
Did your exhibition in at Queen's Museum included the local artists of Southeast Asian heritage, or this exhibition was specifically for Thai artists or Southeast Asia from its mainland?
Yes, it was from Southeast Asian artists from Southeast Asia, living in Southeast Asia. So I had a few Thai artists, Cambodian, Vietnamese, and Indonesian. So it was an interesting group of artists, very interesting works. Um, that really sparkled that curiosity, the interest of the people, and I was very pleased to see how the audience. There were lots of students, of course. Queen's Museum is also a destination for students, and I was very pleased to see how the students would actually react quite quickly to the stories that were told through these works. It created, as I said, a sort of intimacy that I wouldn't be able to have in Manhattan, let's say, within the same geographical area of artists.
Yeah, I know of Queen's Museum and I visited it on several occasions and I really liked the exhibitions they uh, put together under the previous director. I'm not sure, not familiar what they're doing right now. I'm sure it's still a very interesting space, but yeah, I agree. And your exhibition
Mhm.
must have been a very open mind exhibition because artists from Thailand or Cambodia or Vietnam, they're almost unknown to
Mm.
the Western audience.
Yes, yeah. So it was a great learning point also for me.
Coming back to Thailand and Southeast Asia, there are several Western curators currently working in the region.
Mm.
In your view, is there still space for new voices from outside the region? Or do you feel that the focus should now shift towards nurturing and empowering emerging local curators?
Um, I feel that both approaches should continue to be explored. Outside knowledge, as well as local knowledge from the region. And I say this because, of course, I'm an outsider, as being Italian, and however many years I've lived in Thailand, I still am an outsider to some degrees. And to an outsider like myself, I realize that certain topics or certain approaches more are easier to take compared to local curators or local scholars, perhaps out of education, how is carried out the education here, or simply the approaches that try not to be too controversial within situations that go on in Southeast Asia. So I think both approaches are very valuable. There could be some outsider knowledge or approach that can perhaps tackle these topics that are a little bit more complex in combination with curators that also with the local and deep knowledge within just this geographical area would enhance the depth of the product of the curatorial studies. So I wouldn't discard one or the other, and I feel this is also a little bit the internationally how curators operate. All over the world, we have curators coming from all over the world, just because it's so now possible to migrate for the good reason, or maybe even also nowadays for sad reasons. But there's a lot of migrations and movement, and I think that should be incorporated into the curatorial practices.
Congratulations on being appointed curator of the Timor-Leste Pavilion for the 2026 Venice Biennale. How did this opportunity come about?
Thank you so much. And it's really an honor for me to be the curator of the Timor-Leste Pavilion in Venice. Of course, Venice is such an established and amazing opportunity to present narratives that belong to different and specific nations. So I'm also very honored to be able to work with Timor-Leste to present Timor-Leste to the world. I visited the first pavilion last year. It was a very successful pavilion with a very groundbreaking artist, Maria Madeira, and that was my first approach with Timor-Leste. Since seeing Maria's work, I was at the time working on a project on female voices and gender equality, which is a project that then was realized in Singapore early this year, titled Disobedient Bodies Reclaiming Her. And it featured 8 female artists from Southeast Asia. And once I saw Maria's work, I immediately invited Maria to join my project if she was free, if she wanted to, because her work are really at the core of how we can portray female narratives on a bigger platform. How can we address gender equality? And so Maria and I worked together for the project. She was one of the 8 artists. And that led me to know more about Timor-Leste and do more research on Timor-Leste. And also to develop relations with Maria, understand how she works, what is the context of the artistic community in Timor-Leste. And then slowly I was approached by the commissioner, the Secretary of State. Actually, it was a series of interviews that I had to go through, and then eventually, to my surprise, I was selected, and I am still humbled by this opportunity, especially to work with Timor-Leste, because it's a very small country. It's the youngest countries that we know. It's only 25 years old. So this is really a groundbreaking opportunity to talk about Timor-Leste to the world. And it's, of course, it's a big responsibility, but we are doing this journey together with the team, and I feel we are on the right track.
The theme of the Biennale is in minor keys. How are you interpreting this in the context of Timor-Leste's history and artistic voices?
Well, overall, I would say the history of Timor-Leste is in minor keys. Timor-Leste has been an hidden, almost non-acknowledged country for very, very long. It was under Portuguese colonization for 300 years, and then they've only managed to be independent for 7 days in 1975, and then there was the Indonesian occupation, which was on the ground until 1999. So Timor-Leste carries a deeply traumatic past, which has left its marks on the community, on the collective memory. I would say it's still very recent because it's still a very recent young country to become independent. But at the same time, I've just come back from a research trip in Timor-Leste, and while I was there, I've also realized that um, one trait which is remarkable is the resilience of its ancestral traditions, which I feel have endured despite almost near annihilation. They've managed to maintain those very deep embedded traditions. Animism, animist beliefs continue to exist with Christianity, and it's in a very unique combination and a very natural, syncretic way. Nature is not separate from life, but the land, it's part of the life of the people. So all these voices are minor voices, and that is my approach at the moment to involve these voices, especially focusing on language and the notion of how oral history and storytelling, which is what their ancestral beliefs have been carried on, how oral history becomes a written history, and how the transmission of knowledge continues through the generations. So those are the initial thoughts, and I think in that the pavilion will have its own narrative, but it will very much blend within the bigger framework of the Venice Biennale in minor keys.
What advice would you give to emerging curators who want to work internationally or engage with underrepresented communities?
My advice is drawn from my experience, so it's a very honest advice. And I mentioned earlier in our conversation that field work for me is really the key stepping stone in developing any project. So my advice would be, if you want to engage with communities, underrepresented communities, or anyway different communities, we all need to be involved in hands-on in research and visit these communities to develop the conversation with them, and of course with the artist. So my projects always start from research, and this research could take years, not only for the pavilion, for instance, which is a very important project, but for any projects that I've been involved. I start engaging with the communities very earlier on, as well as with the artist, to understand really and be honest and truthful to the voices that are being portrayed in the projects. um, to also work with the artists to find to develop the thematic and how we want to shape the conversation amongst artists and communities. And this is, I think, is especially important if we want to develop projects that are socially and politically sensitive. So I always feel that a very rigorous research is the base for moving forward. So this would be my strongest advice: be involved, hands-on, physically into the place that you want to address with the communities that you want to present.
Thank you so much, Loredana. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just a second. I am cancel.